Finally starting the last video in this ridiculously long trailer series. Added a couple more things on the back door that I'm going to run through, and then we're going to get to the inside and I'll give you just a run through of how I organized it all. The first thing that got added was these legs here, and another one over there. These are great because on uneven ground, like beside a sidewalk, these can extend however far you want. The other thing that got added are the 3 bumpers at the top that protect the sheet metal from getting just completely destroyed when you put the ramp door down. One thing you might notice is I don't have any handle on here because I actually use the legs as my handle. While I only have one leg down, you can see how this makes a little bit of an elevated workplace for anything that I need to do out and about near the trailer. This is how I deploy the legs. I get to show you one side, and then also here are some wheel wedges that I made using that elevated workspace. You can see here one of the most important additions is a little bit of interior lighting. This just runs off the battery in the back. Speaking of the back, we're going to start in the back because if you've been watching my channel for like years, and I don't know why you would have, but if you have, thank you very much. You know that I built a rolling cart for my plastic shelves once upon a time 1,000 years ago. Obviously I didn't want to use rolling carts in my storage trailer, but because I use basically every trade instead of just this is my plumbing trailer, this is my carpentry trailer, I wanted to make sure I had a lot of storage buckets for all the different things I end up having to do. And this is just on the one side. On the other side, I've got 8 more. Up here is for my sheet metal, which is mostly HVAC. Here I've got tile stuff. This is my general tubes of goop, which sort of spans all the trades, but if I need caulk or spray foam or whatever, it's in there. This is just a storage bucket of leftover bits from all the tools that you never use, like the bags and all that sort of thing. This is my electrical bucket. This is what I've got for drywall. This is mostly empty, but it's what I use for car stuff. And then I've got another just sort of miscellaneous tub here for all the rolls of things. I've got some backer rod in here, I've got some butyl tape, I've got seal gasket, I've got a short roll of vapor barrier. All the rolls of stuff go in here. On this side, we start with the PPE bucket. It's got my mask, my goggles, my welding helmet, my earmuffs, and anything else that I think is kind of PPE. Then I've got a bucket for electronics. Now, this is different from electrical. This is for all the low voltage stuff that I ever have to deal with. This is a weird one. If you remember back to my quartz videos, I had a very long work table set up, and these are the actual gussets from the stands that held up the 2x4s. This is just the MDF stuff so that if I ever want to rebuild it, I don't have to cut them out and I don't have to buy another sheet of MDF because that's still like 50 to 70 bucks a sheet. Then I've got my paint sprayer and some moving blankets and then 2 large buckets of battery operated tools. These are pretty easy to get at if you want just one thing. So this has my drills, my drivers, my nail guns, my saws, anything that is battery operated goes in these 2 buckets. Down here, this one's really heavy. It's got my nails and screws in it, and this one is also really heavy and it's not labeled, but it's my concrete saw and my concrete spikes for forming and anything else that's very specifically concrete related in there. Another heavy one, I tried to make sure to put all the heavy stuff at the bottom, is the welder, and then corded tools. In here, this used to be my screws bucket, but I changed that to be plumbing because I did something else for these screws. We'll show you that in a minute. And then this one that isn't labeled is just all the miscellaneous stuff that was on top of my shelves before, like big spools of cable that I didn't want to try to use a whole electrical bucket to get all the stuff together. So the cable spools got in there, and other things like my pressure washer bottle here, you know, one of those little hand pumpy, and it's got the hose and you just like spray stuff down. Up one we have extension cords, and over we've got all the stuff for painting, and that's it for all the buckets in the back. Now you might have noticed that there's this big goofy crate looking thing. That's my art crate, and I built this specifically so that I could have a home for the big heavy, doesn't need to ever be accessed until I'm in my final house, and then I can get all my art that I've accumulated over, you know, the 20 years that I've been alive. Coming over here, I've got all my long yard tools as well as some brooms and stuff. These were kind of a chore to make because there's no real good solution for this stuff. But I ended up making basically just a 2x4 with a support and another piece of 2x4 cut in half. And then I made these little latches to sit on the front here. These are completely scratch made and they just go with a couple of wood screws. They work. They're not pretty, but they do exactly what I wanted them to. I do have a couple of things just hanging out on hooks as well. And then my harpoon and my wrecking pry bar live in a little hole here, and it has another hole down in the floor. I don't have a home for this table yet. Then we get to the big things that I don't have to access as much, like my concrete mixer and my drill press. But then we get to the big things that I have to access a lot, like the shop vac and the table saw. And then I have in one spot all my yard tools. So my folded up lawnmower, my rototiller, my power rake, and my seed spreader, and then a bucket of general yard stuff like hoses and hose sprayers, and there's a sprinkler in there that I'm probably never ever going to use again. Coming back to the other side again, I've got a bucket of clamps up here and a bucket of general hardware, hinges and slides and such. This stuff is all my clamshell tools that I have bothered to keep in clamshells, and they stay in because I've got a little lip here. You can see that a little bit more down over here. It's just a little plywood strip that got glued and screwed all the way along to keep these buckets from just slipping out while I'm driving. Then below I've got my laser level bucket, which I'm missing the lid for apparently. I should find that. I've got my quartz working stuff. All the stuff I need to work quartz is in here. Then I've got all my drill bits and hole saws, and that's about that in there. One bucket for that. Aside that is my grinder accessories, not the actual grinder. The battery grinder is in the battery tools, and the corded grinder is in the corded tools. Then I've got all my network stuff in here. A small bucket of some leftover shims, and a wee little tub for all my nails of different lengths. Now you'll notice that these don't have a lip. I wanted that so I could pack as much stuff in as tight as possible. Like I've got, you know, maybe half an inch here, maybe 3/16 or a quarter here. There's not a lot of room. And I did that so I could pack in as much as I wanted. And the way that I make sure that it doesn't slide out is they're all slanted in backwards. And I've got a couple of boxes of little small sorted things. This is mostly IKEA leftover with a little bit of extra in here. Another one that isn't very full. Got some washers and some deck screws in there. All of my small bolts that come in those little $2 or $3 packs. And believe it or not, I have an entire organizer dedicated to leftover computer screws. I move this out of the way. I do need to come up with a better way to store my 2 cable reels, my 2 extension cord reels. These things are awesome and I love them, but right now they're just sitting on some extra empty space, and I don't love that. Oh, I actually have 3. 1, 2, and 3. So I'm probably going to go looking for some sort of metal bracket that can come up and just hang out that way. And then I can sit these in here, hopefully like that. Might do that later today after a bike ride, I don't know. And I've got my 3 big tool organizers. Remember I said that my plumbing bucket was originally screws? Well, these are the screws and such that were in that bucket. I've got basically no organization in this stuff at all. I've got some GRKs here, some washers and brackets, some metal drywall screws, leftover trailer plywood bolts, toggle bolts, concrete screws, and cabinet screws in there. This one is sort of more of the same. Short construction, medium construction, more GRKs, more medium construction, 2 containers of cabinet screws, more short construction, more white cap metal screws, and assorted hardware and dowels. And in the last one, I'm going to take it out all the way because I'm doing this one-handed. This is mostly stuff that I bought when I didn't know what I was doing. So I've got like some number 12 screws, some number 13 screws. This is my drywall anchors and that too. Some roofing nails in here. more number 12 by 2.5 screws, some machine bolts, some very long, I think these were used back in the day when I had to build a rolling cart that would hold up a full filing cabinet. So that was a lot of weight. I ended up using 4x4s, and these were the bolts for that. Then I've got some lag bolts here that are probably too short to be useful for anything other than weird random projects, and more bolts and nuts. Down below, I've got my long box. In my long box are things like my rocket light and my broom magnet and my long clamps and a couple of tripods and my long sharp scraper. That's the shiny thing in the middle there. I'm not really worried about this one sliding around because it's just so heavy. Beside that, I've got a bucket full of casters and then a bucket full of chain. I do have a little stop on here for those. And then my miter saw that lives down there. That's the only place I could come up with for that. As I've said, this is a do everything trailer, not a carpentry trailer. So it didn't make any sense to me to build this into it so that it could be permanently used. Down below the miter saw, I've got a totally undersized miter saw stand. And all the way up above, we've got my charging platform, my track saw. My track saw track is here. I've got my corded Dremel, my cordless knockoff Dremel, hangers, red guard, and chalk lines, and that red guard's probably going to be garbage by the time I get to the next place that I need to use it. I should bring that inside. I do have a bit of undeveloped space here. This chainsaw, I'm probably going to have to take the bar off and the chain and get that into my corded tools bucket there. But other than that, this is mostly just empty space that I sort of use for staging. And I just mean that, like, I get all the stuff that I need for a project into this spot when the stuff isn't in the way, and then I can try to carry it all at once instead of making a whole bunch of little trips. Finally, coming up to the front of it, I guess, if that's the back, this is the front, even though it's the back. The front of where I access the trailer from. So I have my tool chest here, which won't actually slide apart here because it's got nice little overlaps. Craftsman did a good job on that one, but they did a bad job on basically everything else. I had this at the front because it's got my screwdrivers in it, it's got my pliers and my channel locks, general measuring stuff. This is all the small things, writing tools and sockets, I guess. A couple of hammers in here, nail puller, this thing. Everyone needs one of these. But this is all the stuff that I expect to have to use frequently. This drawer never works well. This has all my other drill bits in sets, my socket set, my crescent wrenches, and the only two Kreg products that I own. Oh, I forgot. I've got a whole container of Sharpies up here too. So that's my tool trailer. I built it. It works. As long as I make sure to turn off the light and don't drain the battery.